In this lesson, we'll introduce anatomy and physiology by first defining anatomy and physiology. Right, we're taking this course, we should know what those two words mean. We also study anatomy and physiology from very basic, and we build upon those basic concepts to more complex. So we just want to do an overview of the levels of organization. So it's very simple. Anatomy is the study of structure. Right? We take into consideration what the structure is made of, where the structure is located in the body, and then are there any associated structures? A great example would be this. Let's say we were studying the heart, right? So we would take the heart and we would look at all the different cells that make up the heart, and then maybe the different connective tissue that holds the heart together, any nerves that may be in there, and we'll look at all of those and say, hey, this is what the heart is made of. Then we'll take a look at where is the heart located, right? So most of us know it's going to be in the chest cavity, right? We're going to call that the thoracic cavity. And then within the thoracic cavity is another cavity called the pericardial cavity, and that's where we would find it. Then we would want to consider what are any associated structures to the heart. How about blood vessels, right? We know that the heart has arteries and veins connected to it, so we would want to study those. The heart pumps blood, right? That's an associated structure. We would want to study the blood. Okay, so anatomy is the study of structure. Now, physiology, very simple, is the study of function, right? We want to see how does the organ or the tissue, how does it work? So if we were looking at the heart, we would want to consider, well, what makes the individual heart cell beat? How does it beat, right? How does it function that way? Then, how does the heart work as a unit, right? How do all those muscle cells work together to get the heart to pump? Okay, so that would be function, right? Anatomy, study of structure, physiology, the study of function. And you'll see that anatomy dictates physiology, right? Structure dictates function. If you took your elbow joint, let's say, kind of just felt your elbow joint, the way your elbow joint moves, where you can bend it forward and backward, or you can turn your palm up and down, right? All that movement occurs at the elbow joint. Well, that movement, the function of the elbow joint is based on how the bones are put together. That is the structure. Okay, so anatomy will dictate physiology, and you'll see that more and more, guys, as you go through your studies. Just one other example while I'm thinking about it. An example outside of the body would be something like this. Let's say you need a new cell phone. Okay, so you go to the store and you get the cell phone, and they give you the cell phone. So you take it out of the box, and there you're holding this nice, beautiful phone. It's got a nice case. It's got a nice screen protector. It's got a cord for you to charge it. Right? You may even have earbuds that are with it, and that would be the actual phone, the structure of the phone. That is the anatomy, right? That's the actual hardware that you're holding. But what makes the phone work? Right? That phone works because of the apps that you've downloaded. Apps to do your calls, apps to do texting, apps to do emailing, and so on and so forth, taking pictures. Without those applications, the phone wouldn't work. The apps are the physiology. They are what make the phone work and allow you to do the various things that we do. Right? So the anatomy would be the actual phone that you're holding, right? The hardware. The physiology would be the apps, right? And you see those two go hand in hand. If you just have the phone without the apps, it's probably going to be useless to you. So we can divide anatomy down into two basic categories, if you would. Highlight over here. The first category is known as gross anatomy or macroscopic anatomy, and then I'm just going to go to the other slide for a minute. The second category is going to be microscopic anatomy. So gross anatomy means not disgusting, but gross means big, right? This examines large visible structures, things that we could see with the naked eye. So there's different types of gross anatomy that I want you to be familiar with. The first one is known as surface anatomy which is where you study the exterior features of the body. Now, this is important because let's just say you're, in medicine, and you're going to do a biopsy from the outside in, right? So you have to kind of know the surface and then what structures are underneath it, what deeper structures are underneath it. Anatomists, right, when they find, not anatomists, acupuncturists, excuse me, acupuncturists, when they find the acupuncture point, it's in a very specific, precise location, right? They are masters at surface anatomy, right? Palpating and finding these external features of the body so they can insert their needle in a specific place, right? Even an orthopedist doing taking out fluid from swelling or something like that, right? We have to know our surface anatomy. Now, regional anatomy is kind of a more advanced form of anatomy where you study body areas. When I went to school, we would do dissection, we would do the head and neck, and right, and just work on everything in the head and neck all at once, right? We would do the skin, the muscles, the bone, the blood vessels, and then work our way into the brain. We would just kind of do that whole region. Then we would move to the chest, right? And then we would move to the arms, right? And this would take a period of weeks. Another type of anatomy you see, and you'll actually see this as we look at different images, is cross-sectional anatomy or just sectional anatomy. This is where we study anatomy by looking at diagrams that are cross-sectional. Even x-rays, when you look at MRIs or CAT scans, a lot of that is the imaging is going to be cross-sectional. The way that we predominantly study anatomy in this course here is going to be by studying the different systems, the different organ systems, such as the integumentary system, skeletal system, muscular system, nervous system, respiratory, all of those different systems you may be familiar with. This is how we study anatomy in this course here. If you do go on into more medical types of specialties, you can study clinical anatomy, such as pathological anatomy. Here you would look at changes that take place in anatomy as a result of disease, right? So what are the changes to the anatomical structures? Radiographic anatomy, right, is seeing all of our structures on X-ray or MRI or CAT scan or PET scans, different types of imaging. And then surgical anatomy would include things, anatomical landmarks that are important to surgeons. So these are all examples of anatomy that are more specialized to clinical. Another type of anatomy that you could study, right, we won't typically don't do it in this course too much, is developmental anatomy. What are the anatomical changes from conception, right, from the day the egg and the sperm unite, all the way to adulthood, right? And embryology would take those first 8 weeks of gestation in the uterus. Okay, so again, these are all types of gross anatomy or macroscopic anatomy, right? Macro meaning big, right? Things that we can see with the naked eye. Now, microscopic anatomy, here we're going to look at cells and molecules. So these things are very small and we typically want to use a microscope, right? There's different types of microscopes, right? Some are limiting where you can just see the basic cell and maybe the nucleus in the cell membrane, just, kind of like bigger structures, where electron microscopes can get down to looking at real specific things within the cell. So there's two types of microscopic anatomy that I'd like you to know. The term we use when we study cells is called cytology. Right? Cyto means cell, and ology means to study. Histology would be the study of tissues, right? If you were looking at muscle tissue or connective tissue, epithelial tissue, that we would call histology. And in this course this semester, we're going to be doing both histology and cytology. Okay, so those were the different types of anatomy. What about physiology? So these are very similar to what we just looked at. We can just study also cell physiology, right? So if you know that physiology means function, what would we be studying in a course like that would be the functions of the cells. Organ physiology is where we study specific organs. So, like I said before, the heart, if we were studying the heart, how does that heart work, right? What makes it contract? What makes it beat harder? What makes it beat faster? That type of thing, okay? How does the blood flow through the heart? Oh, there's so much we can learn on just looking at the physiology. But the third dot is predominantly the way we study physiology in our course. It's called systemic physiology. So we're basically going to be following systemic anatomy, right? Studying the systems and systemic physiology. Right, so some of the things that we're going to be studying, right, neurology, neurophysiology, endocrinology. We'll see how different hormones work. Cardiovascular would be the heart, immunology, right, how the immune system works, respiratory, renal would be kidney. Okay, and again, if you're going into medical fields, allied health, pathological physiology would be, hey, what are the effects on function as a result of disease? Okay, so pathological anatomy, what were the effects on anatomy as a result of pathology? But here it would be, what would be the results of function on the cell or the organ as a result of disease? Okay, let's finish up this lesson by taking a look at how we're going to study anatomy as you go on in your studies. We always go from simple to more complex. So the simplest level is known as the chemical level, right? Some people do call it the molecular level. If you want to jot that down, you're more than welcome to. Chemical level or the molecular level. This consists of different atoms and molecules that make up the chemicals of life, right? So atoms are the smallest stable units of matter, right? We'll discuss this in future lessons. And then if we take atoms and we bond them together, we can make up molecules. As an example, one of the most famous molecules that makes up about 2/3 of our body is something called H2O. Right? And most of you know that is water, right? So water is an important chemical. All of our chemical reactions take place in water, and like I said, we're about 2/3 water. So it is a big part of our anatomy and physiology. Other chemicals that you know too, guys, proteins, right? They make up a big part of our anatomy. Carbohydrates, DNA, RNA, lipids, right? Lipids are a big part of our anatomy and physiology, believe it or not. Now, all these different chemicals, right, if we group them together, they then form the next highest level of organization known as the cellular level, right? Cells are the smallest living units in the body. And we're going to see there's a number of different cells, epithelial cells, blood cells, nerve cells, adipose cells, which are fat cells. Over your studies of anatomy, you're going to learn a lot of different cells, right? We have something like, on average, about 75 trillion cells in the body, right? So there's a bunch of different types. They're not all the same. Now, these cells, they come together and they're going to form the next level of organization known as the tissue level, right? A tissue is a group of cells that work together. And this is important. There are four primary tissue types, right? If I ever ask you what are the four primary tissue types, they're going to go like this: epithelium, or we could say epithelial tissue. We're going to see, you don't have to write this down now, but we're going to see that epithelium primarily does covering and lining. It covers things, it lines tubes in our body. Connective tissue is the second primary tissue type, and you can kind of figure out from the name, yeah, this is probably holding things together, right? And that's exactly what it does. But it's a little bit more extensive than that. It does form some of our frame. Blood, believe it or not, is a connective tissue. So we'll see there's a lot of different types of connective tissue. The third one is muscle tissue. And then the fourth primary tissue type is the nervous tissue. Okay, so we went from chemicals. Chemicals became cells. Cells combine to become tissues. Now, the four tissue types, they come together and they're going to form our organs, right? Organs are made of at least two or more tissues working together. It actually turns out, guys, that most organs have all four tissue types. If I go back to the heart, right, when we were doing the study of the heart, as my example, if I took out a heart from a cadaver, if I'm holding the heart on the outside, the heart is covered by epithelial tissue, right? That was one of the four primary tissue types. If I peeled away the epithelium, I would see muscle tissue in there. If I looked into the heart, using a microscope, I would see connective tissue holding the heart together, and then I would also see nervous tissue, right? I would actually see different types of parts of the nervous system on the heart. So a heart would be an example of having all four tissue types. Okay, so the organ is at least two tissue types working together to form the organ. Now, different organs that have similar function, they're going to form the next level known as the organ system, right? So an organ system is a group of interacting organs. And I do want you to know this, there are 11 organ systems in the body. In a subsequent lesson, we'll go over all of the 11 organ systems as an overview. It's a good idea to have an idea of the overview, an overview of the organ systems early on in your studies of anatomy, so that as instructors give different examples, you'll have at least an idea of some of the organs in the organ systems. And then as you go through your courses, you'll learn those organ systems in much more detail. So just as an example, the digestive system, right? That's one of the systems we know about for eating. So all the organs that are in the digestive system, they function together to do digestion, right? The oral cavity, the pharynx or the throat, the esophagus, the stomach, the intestines, right? The liver, gallbladder, pancreas. All of these organs have some duty in digestion, right? They have some function in digestion. So we put them together in this system because they work together. Now, when you take all 11 organ systems and they're healthy and working fine, they're now going to form the highest level of organization, which is basically us, right? We call this the organism, right? So this is an individual life form. And again, since we're studying human anatomy and physiology, it would be us, right? If you were studying animal like zoology or something like that, then it would be whatever animals you're looking at. But we're going to keep it to human anatomy and physiology. So here's a diagram. Basically, the next two slides will kind of show this progression, and then I have one other one. So here we could see, guys, at the chemical level, right? So over here, all of this is going to be the chemical level. So we could see here, they're giving you an example of some atoms. They come together to form some proteins, right? This is actually a protein. You don't have to know this right now. This is actually called actin. And then the actin is going to interact with another protein called myosin. So all three of these boxes here just kind of represent different chemicals, but we went from simple to a little bit more complex to a little bit more complex just at the chemical level. Now, these different chemicals are now going to form the next level of organization right here, the cells. And you'll see that these different chemicals are forming a cardiac cell. This is actually a heart cell. This is what it looks like. Now, these heart cells, watch what they're going to do. They're going to combine to form the heart muscle tissue, right? We said before that muscle is one of the primary tissue types. So here is cardiac muscle. All the tissues that make up the heart, right, at the tissue level, they're going to combine, right? They're just showing us one, the muscle, but as I gave you in my example before, connective tissue, epithelial tissue, nervous tissue, those four tissue types are going to unite to now form, here you go, the heart. The heart works with other organs to form the cardiovascular system. So here you can see the heart, and then all these red and blue lines represent blood vessels. And within the blood vessels is blood, obviously. So that now forms our first system known as the cardiovascular system. Right? So all the organs that are associated with the heart for moving blood belong to this system. Then this is one of 11 systems. these 11 systems, when they come together, and here you can see in this female here, not only is her blood vessels in there, but her lungs, which are part of the respiratory system, is in there. Her organs for digestion are in there, reproductive organs, nervous system organs, the skeletal system is in there. You can see some bones. So they're kind of showing you, and the muscular system right here. You can see all the organ systems kind of together there to form a human, right? So we have 11 systems that unite to form a human or an organism. Right? And finally, this is from just another textbook, just to kind of give you an idea. So again, here you go. You have chemicals. They unite to form cells. So in this example, this is a different type of muscle cell. This is a smooth muscle cell. Smooth muscle cells, they unite to form tissues. And so here's the tissue level, right? We have some smooth muscle tissue. Smooth muscle tissue is a component of the stomach, in this case the stomach, you can see it here, and that's going to now form an organ. And the stomach is part of the digestive system, and you can see here the stomach right about there is with the intestines, the esophagus, the liver. That little green thing there is the gallbladder. The pancreas is in here somewhere, right? But kind of superimposed there right behind the stomach. So that would be the first system in this diagram here, one of 11. And then all the 11 systems together form this nice healthy person over here, right? He's going to be the organism. So that concludes this lesson. Again, we know now that anatomy and physiology are basically the study of structure and function. And then we also know the different types of anatomy and physiology. And then we went over the levels of organization. Again, we're going to study in that way from simple to complex. Chemical, cellular, cells become tissues, tissues become organs, organs belong to organ systems, and then the 11 organ systems that you study will eventually form a nice, healthy organism.